The client part React.js, we are going to build one application. The backend server Spring Boot, we are going to build one application. And we are going to connect this to wall using OAuth2. Let's go dive into the picture. From the client, to get the protected resource from the server, it will send an authorization request. This request is a part of OAuth2 protocol, and the server consists of two parts, which is authorization server and resource server. The authorization server and resource server is built into the Spring Boot application, and the core Java 8 is being used. The authorization server is the one who authorizes the user. Whenever the client sends an authorization request, the authorization server verifies this user and password exist in our system and what kind of role this user has. So once it is verified, it will send one access token in the second part. Once the client receives the access token, then every request the client makes, it will attach the access token and send it to the resource server. And the resource server will recognize from the access token who this user and what kind of role this user has in the system. This URL is accepted by this role, or this URL is not accepted for this user. It will be determined by the access token, which indirectly mentioned to the resource server in every API calls. In header, the client will attach the access token, the resource server receive it and verify it who this user and what kind of role this user has in the system. Once all this are done and this user is allowed to get the protected resources, then the resource server will produce the protected resources in the form of JSON to the client system. So this is the overview, and we are going to see in this tutorial the Spring Boot part, the server part. In next tutorial, we are going to see the React.js part. So let's go directly dive into our Spring Boot application. So if you have earlierly worked in the Spring Boot application, the main is the one which is the center point of starting the application. Every Spring Boot application will start from the main, just like any Java program. The Spring Boot application dot run, and the parameters it passes is the class itself and the args wherever we are passing to the main program. This is the starting point of the Spring Boot application. So as we told in the picture, the server contains two parts. One is authorization server and one is the resource server. Authorization server is the one who authorizes the client whether this user exists or not, and resource server is the one who holds the resource. So in the Spring Boot application, we have to mention everything in a configuration manner. Spring Boot is more of a configuration over the users. It is really a configurable platform where you can configure anything. Let's go dive into the authorization server. In authorization server, we have to configure the authentication manager. So what is the authentication manager we need to give in the authorization? I'll go in deep some more, but let's focus on this file. We have to define whether what kind of secret key we needed, what kind of credential we needed. Everything we need to configure in the authorization server, like the client and the passport type or the grant type, what kind of scope that user has, read or write, and is this user credential is based on passport or is it based on access code or something else. Everything we need to mention in the config. And finally, we need to check this access token is authenticated. Only if it is authenticated, then only it can be retrieved by the client. The password encoder, I will go dive into this encoder. So anything in the server, we need to protect it by encrypting it. Here we are using bcrypt password encoder, which is here. Bcrypt password encoder is the bean initialization in the main function itself. So once this is completed, the default password encryptor will be bcrypt password encrypted for this entire application. So bean annotation is nothing but initializing any bean into the system. If you put anything annotation with admin, it will initialize those bean into the system. So password encoder, we are initializing as bcrypt password encoder. This password encoder is being used in here to encode the secret key or password. Next part is the resource server. There we have configured what are the authentication we needed, like client secret, what kind of roles this has, it has to be authenticated or what, password encoder, everything we are defining in authorization server. And one more server we need to define is the resource server, which is here. It is nothing but what kind of URL this user can authenticate. Like I previously showed you in the diagram, this authorization server only responsible for checking the user. Resource server is the one who providing the URLs, who providing the resource to the client. Like anything which has slash API in the URL, it has to be authenticated. It is a protected resource. Other than slash home slash register slash login is permitted across any users. It should be authorized request, and this one is free of use. Any user can use directly, and slash API must be authenticated. This we are configuring in resource server config using resource server config adapter in this program. Web security is the one where we need to configure the basics things like in the authentication authorization server, the user needs to be verified. The you providing when the client React.js provides username and password, the authorization server will get the username and password, but it has to verify in the database level, right? So those verification is done in the web security config adapter. This user detail service is the one which contains the repository classes for user details. User table details will be here. This custom user detail service has to be configured in the user details service. So like I previously said, Spring is nothing but a configuration platform where everything is implemented. Your job is just to configure. So user details service, we need to configure our own user details service because we have our own database. I'll go deep into the user details service, but before that, you just consider this as a repository class. And the password encoder, whatever the password which comes along, we need to encode it using bcrypt. And the what kind you need to get the access token, right? So in the picture itself, the first one is to get the authorization request and provide the access token. So to provide the access token, you need to enable, we have enabled here in the resource server these URLs open to everyone, and this is protected, and we haven't told where to get the access token. Here we are telling get this as a open and use this to get the access token. In the config web security config, we are mentioning here the access token URL to get. So any security which access this OAuth slash token allow them, because any user can allow this slash OAuth slash access token. If he cannot access, he cannot get the access token. So any user is free of accessing this URL to get the access token. But once the access token is received, this slash API is the one which is restricted. So once the access token is received at the client level, he can again make a request and get the resources he wanted. So we are making simply in the web security config adapter, we are giving our custom user detail service. We'll go deep into this, and the password encoder which we have initiated at bean level, and this OAuth slash token is the one which gives the access token, and same the authentication manager bean and the access token. So this crops filter is nothing but just some, for you have mentioned you cannot run two application in the same server, and if you access in the any browser, it will not allow you to access the same resource in the same server for security feature. So to avoid this, we are just mentioning this cross filter. But in production grade application, this cross filter is not needed. Why? Because it will be running two different server. This is my local machine, so that's why I'm using this cross filter to avoid the security to intermediate with my configuration, or to avoid the error which caused by the browser. So this is just I'm allowing the control origin, control access token only for the browser. To enable this, I need this one. Otherwise, you don't need this file. You needed only the authorization server and the resource server. And one more thing is web security. That's it. We have done our OAuth2 part. This part is done. Our only job now is to mention the URL API request. We'll go dive into that. Before that, as I told you before, we need to go through this user details repository, right? So we'll go this one, and once we are done with it, we can go back to the API calls. This is our user repository where we have our own user details in here, and this is the custom user details which implemented our user details services. So user details service is the Spring Boot application configuration class interface which we have implemented in our system, and this user detail service has one method called load user by name. This load user by name is the one which we need to give to Spring Boot the user and the user details. So here we need to use our own repository class. This is my own repository which is a database call we need to make, and we need to give the username, and we need to find this user is existing in our system or not. So in the repository class, you can see I have this find by username as a interface method. So here if you pass any username here, this will indirectly get you the user details, and once I got the user details, I'm mapping the user to security core.user, because this is the user which is recognized by the Spring framework. So I am mapping my data table DB data table user details to Spring framework user details user. So everything from my database, username, password is active. Everything I have to mention it here And the authority, like I said before, manager have certain accessibility, user have certain accessibility, or other persons below the manager category have some different role. So every role we need to have one more table in the database level, and we need to give this role over here. So these all mentioned in our custom table. Now we are just mapping our custom table to the Spring Boot Framework API. So our custom table just lies in the entities. As you see, we have the user table, which is nothing but username, password, email, encrypting our password, and we are storing it in the email, phone address, something like that. And roles is nothing but what kind of roles this has. He is a manager user or a normal user. This user and role we are just mapping to the Spring Framework API mentioned authorities. Roles is nothing but in Spring Framework it is called authority level list, and user is same called as user, except it lies on the core branch. So we need to give in a Spring Boot format to the system. This is recognized in the web security. This service auto wired automatically injected those configuration and user details will be provided here. These user details we are configuring right here itself. Now our basic resource authorization is completed and our resource server configuration also completed, except we have to now build our protected resources. That is just a Spring API calls. So in controller we have user controller and protected controller and home controller. So anything related to your application we need to mention our controllers. This is nothing but slash API. Like previously I showed you, slash API is protected, and any API which requires this protocol we need the username and password and access token to get this URL. So if you see any user control, I have annotated a request mapping as slash API slash user, and product controller also slash API slash users. So slash products. So anything which is contains slash API, we have to give be authenticated first. Then only the user can able to use these functionalities. Like get product list, I'm just again making one database call. In the product repository I have one more class, like I showed you the user details. That repository is nothing but this product repository where I can get find all my product code here. So once I got everything, I'm just streaming it to product, I'm sending as a results. So this again I'll explain you depth what how we can build this in a step-by-step manner. But as of now, think of this as at rest controller is just an unidentified class to make this response as rest as JSON format, and at request mapping is the one which maps to your URL that you want to expose to the client, and repository classes are the one which deals with the database and database codes, while get mapping is the one. So we have in the HTTP protocol we have so much protocol list, right? So get, post, put, these kind of things in Spring Boot it is simple as it is just getting the annotation at get mapping. It will become the get request. If you put at post mapping it will may become the post request. So inside this is our custom code. So whatever business logic you have, you just make this as a custom code and you can get it. Like I previously showed, we have the authentication which configured in the authorization server. From the authentication we can get the authorities. Authorities is nothing but a roles. So we can check whether this particular resource is acceptable for this user or not. Based on that, we can provide the resources to the end user, and the resources which produce to the end user should have to be application JSON format. We are setting it here. Once if the request is completed, we are setting to HTTP status to OK. So to run a sample of this application, I just will see the sample how this exactly works. Let me open my Postman. Postman is the tool where you can easily check the response of the server. So right now we don't have our front end application, and this is the Postman is the easiest way to see this JSON format and whatever we have created. So as I have told you in the picture, first the client needs to make the authorization request to the authorization server. The authorization server needs to provide the access token. That we can able to do this over here. This is a call to the /OAuth token, and the grant type is password and the username and password. Once we provided this one, it will automatically gives you the access token. As mentioned here, once we receive the access token, we need to append our access token in the header to receive the protected resource, like this here. This is the private area. So this is like, so if right now I don't have any user details we have, but I don't have any related to. Okay, let's make a call to a user table, as simple as it is. So this user slash API, we have a get mapping, and in the get mapping we have the user details to be retrieved. So this is just a request mapping, just slash API slash users, and I'll just copy this one, this URL. So we have received now access token. We need to get this user list. We don't need this actually in pasted here, because up here itself it is there. Sorry. Maybe we need. I have made slash. Yes, that's my mistake. I have made two slashes over there. Now if you see this, we have list of users. One is Raj and one is the admin, and we have the username details, password, role, whatever this one. So we got the authorization request. We have the access token. We have sent the access token to the user, I mean to the resource use server, and the resource server produced the protected resource for us. I'll again walk through one more time. So this is just a grant type, whether this is the password or one more. There are four types of grant types here. Here we are using the OAuth2 protocol password, and the username and password we need to send to get the access token. And once we send the access token, we'll receive the access token. Once we got the access token, we need to append to our request every request we make to the server, because slash API is the protected resource. To get the protected resource, we need to send our access token with every request we make. Once we appended our access token, we'll get our protected resource as mentioned here. Right now we have completed the Spring Boot part in the backend server. In the next series, I'll make a tutorial video for the front end React.js part. So stay tuned. Thank you for your support. Please subscribe, give thumbs up if you liked it. I would like to make more videos, so please give your support. Thank you so much.